When I walk through the streets of New York, Queens, Astoria, I see people of every color, every background, every story. Some are walking home from work, some are waiting for the train, some are just trying to survive another day in a system that too often decides who gets fairness based on the color of their skin or the weight of their wallet. And I ask myself, how did we get here? In a nation that promises equality, but delivers privilege selectively. I don't care if you're white, black, or brown, you deserve fairness. That's not a slogan. That's a moral truth. Fairness isn't a favor that the powerful hand down to the powerless. It's a right. It's the foundation of justice, the breath of democracy, the soul of a nation that dares to call itself free. And yet, every day, we see systems, housing, healthcare, education built to favor some and fail others. We cannot claim progress when fairness is still rationed like it's in short supply. I stand here as a son of immigrants, as a Muslim, as a public servant who has seen what happens when people are divided by race or faith. But I've also seen something else. When people choose unity over fear, compassion over convenience, that's when real change begins. Fairness doesn't require everyone to look the same or believe the same. It asks only that we treat each other with the same dignity we demand for ourselves. Let's be honest, fairness is uncomfortable. It means confronting privilege. It means saying, I benefit from a system that someone else suffers under. It means choosing justice even when it costs us convenience. But if fairness is easy, it isn't real. To the people who think fairness divides us, I say no. Fairness is what binds us. Because when the black worker earns a living wage, when the brown student gets an equal chance, when the white neighbor stands up for the immigrant next door, we all rise. That's how communities grow stronger. That's how nations heal. And I say this to every American, every New Yorker, fairness is not a debate to win. It's a duty to live. It's the quiet courage to see humanity before identity. It's the act of standing up, not for your people, but for all people. Because when we defend fairness for others, we secure freedom for ourselves. I don't care if you're white, black, or brown, you deserve fairness. They say the city never sleeps, but I think it does dream. It dreams through the people who walk its streets, through the voices that echo in its subways, through the hands that build its future. It dreams in 1,000 different accents, 100 different skin tones, one unshakable hope to be treated fairly. And yet, how many of those dreamers wake up each morning to find that fairness is still a privilege, not a guarantee? How many are told in subtle and not so subtle ways that their worth depends on the shade of their skin, the faith they follow, or the name on their passport? It's time we ask ourselves, with courage and honesty, what kind of society we've become, and more importantly, what kind we still can be. Because fairness is not a luxury. It is the heartbeat of justice, the first promise of democracy, and the last hope of those who feel unseen. But today, fairness feels fragile, as if it can be negotiated, postponed, or divided. We've built systems that measure people not by their integrity or effort, but by where they were born, what they look like, or what language their mother whispered to them as a child. And when that happens, the dream of equality turns into an illusion, a slogan we repeat but rarely live. I want to speak to the truth many already know, but few are willing to say aloud. Fairness isn't colorblindness, it's courage. It's not pretending we don't see difference, it's acknowledging that difference has too often been used as a reason to deny opportunity. Fairness is not silence in the face of injustice. It's speaking when it's uncomfortable, standing when it's unpopular, and acting when it's inconvenient. Fairness is not neutral. It takes sides, not with race or class, but with what's right. Walk through any neighborhood, and you'll see the story written on walls, on faces, in quiet moments. A man works 2 jobs and still can't afford the rent. A child with talent and drive gets overlooked because of the school district she was born into. A woman is questioned for her accent before her intelligence is recognized. These are not isolated incidents, they're symptoms of a deeper imbalance. They're the result of a society that claims equality as a value, but forgets to build it into its institutions. And until we fix that, we can't claim fairness at all. Fairness demands self-reflection from each of us. It asks, how do I benefit from systems that disadvantage others? How often do I choose comfort over justice? How often do I stay silent because speaking out might cost me something? The truth is, fairness is not won by waiting for someone else to change the rules. It's built by people who refuse to play by unjust ones. It's built by citizens who see beyond themselves, who understand that a society is only as strong as its most excluded members. There's something deeply powerful about believing in fairness, even when the world gives you every reason not to. It's revolutionary, in fact, because fairness challenges the old logic of power, that some lives matter more than others, that some deserve more dignity than others. Fairness says no. It says dignity isn't earned, it's inherent, that your worth isn't negotiable, it's undeniable, that you don't have to look a certain way, worship a certain God, or speak a certain language to deserve respect. Fairness, at its core, is love made public, love translated into policy, compassion written into law, humanity expressed in action. But fairness doesn't begin in governments or courts. It begins in us. It begins the moment you choose to listen before you judge, to understand before you dismiss, to lift others even when you're still climbing. Fairness is a daily practice in how we treat a coworker, how we speak to a stranger, how we stand up for someone who has no one else to stand for them. It's the recognition that our freedoms are connected, that when one person is denied fairness, everyone's justice is at risk. Imagine a world where fairness wasn't something we had to fight for, where every child, regardless of color or background, grew up believing that the system would protect them, not punish them. Imagine what that would do to the human spirit, how much creativity, compassion, and progress we could unleash if we stopped wasting energy fighting the same old prejudices. Fairness isn't just about equity, it's about potential. It's about unlocking what's possible when everyone is given the same chance to contribute, to create, to thrive. And maybe that's the real test of any nation. Not how high its towers rise, but how fairly its people are treated. Because fairness builds something taller than skyscrapers: trust. It creates the belief that no matter who you are or where you start, you will be seen, you will be heard, you will be valued. And that belief, that sacred sense of belonging, is what keeps a society from falling apart. So when we say, I don't care if you're white, black, or brown, you deserve fairness, it isn't just a statement of equality, it's a declaration of responsibility. A reminder that the color of your skin should never determine the content of your opportunity. It's a promise that fairness is not up for debate, it's a birthright. And the day we start living by that truth, not just preaching it, is the day we finally wake up from the illusion of equality and begin the real work of justice. Fairness is not a word that belongs only in courtrooms, political campaigns, or textbooks. It belongs in everyday life, in the way we treat each other, in the choices we make, in the systems we uphold or ignore. It's easy to talk about fairness when it benefits us, but the true test of our integrity comes when fairness demands that we give up something: a comfort, a bias, a privilege. That is where the real work begins, and it's where society either evolves or collapses. Fairness is not charity, it's justice in motion. It is the measure of how deeply we understand the simple truth that humanity cannot thrive when inequality is its foundation. Think about it. Fairness doesn't exist in words. It lives in structures. It's in how a school is funded, how wages are distributed, how neighborhoods are designed, how laws are written and enforced. And for too long, those structures have favored a few, while leaving many to struggle. We often mistake progress for fairness, but they are not the same. Progress can build taller buildings, but fairness builds stronger communities. Progress can create wealth, but fairness ensures everyone has the chance to earn it with dignity. Progress may celebrate individual success, but fairness demands collective well-being. In the real world, fairness requires a constant act of awareness, the willingness to see beyond the surface. It means asking hard questions. Why is one child born into opportunity while another is born into disadvantage? Why are some people assumed innocent until proven guilty, while others are treated as suspects by default? Why does the same effort bring different rewards based on where you live or what you look like? These are not just questions of economics or policy, they are questions of conscience. And every generation must decide whether it will face them honestly or hide behind excuses. To live fairly means to live with empathy. It means recognizing that fairness cannot exist in isolation. It's a chain that links every person to another. When one link is broken, the whole chain weakens. You cannot claim fairness for yourself while ignoring its absence in someone else's life. If you turn away from injustice because it doesn't touch you directly, you are choosing privilege over principle. True fairness has no favorites. It doesn't ask who you are before it grants you dignity. It simply says, you are human, and that's enough. But the idea of fairness also challenges us to look inward. We are quick to demand justice from systems and leaders, yet fairness begins in the smallest, quietest moments. When you decide to tell the truth, even if it costs you. When you refuse to exploit someone's vulnerability for your gain. When you listen to those whose stories are different from your own. Fairness is not abstract. It's practical. It's how you treat a stranger at work, a neighbor in need, or a friend in disagreement. The smallest act of fairness, repeated by millions, can shift the direction of a nation. We often underestimate the power of fairness because it's not loud, it doesn't always march or shout. It works silently, in classrooms, in offices, in the choices parents make, in the courage of those who stand up for what's right when no one is watching. Fairness is humility in action. It says, I may not know your pain, but I believe you deserve to be heard. It doesn't erase our differences, it honors them by ensuring they never become barriers. What makes fairness revolutionary is that it demands we stop seeing life as a competition. The world teaches us to climb higher, even if it means stepping on others. Fairness teaches us to lift together, to understand that when one person is left behind, the summit loses its meaning. Fairness transforms societies not by punishment, but by participation. It invites everyone to take part in justice, to hold themselves accountable for how their decisions affect others. And let's be clear, fairness isn't about perfection. It's about effort. It's about choosing, again and again, to stand on the side of what's right, even when it feels like you're standing alone. It's about learning to see systems for what they are, human-made, and therefore human-changeable. It's realizing that fairness is not something we inherit, it's something we build. Every policy, every reform, every act of courage adds a brick to that foundation. Imagine a society that defines success not by who has the most, but by how many have enough. Imagine a classroom where fairness means every child's potential is nurtured, not just measured. Imagine a workplace where fairness ensures respect before profit. These visions are not fantasies. They are possibilities waiting for courage to activate them. Fairness gives birth to that courage. It transforms empathy into action and hope into policy. And when fairness becomes a shared value, not a debate topic, not a slogan, but a lived truth, everything changes. Communities become safer not because we build higher walls, but because we build deeper trust. People stop competing for dignity and start collaborating for progress. Fairness reminds us that justice is not about punishment, it's about balance. And the more balanced our systems become, the more humane our world will be. So, fairness is not just an idea, it's a way of living that measures our humanity. It asks us to look beyond ourselves, to understand that equality is not a dream for the few, but a duty for the many. It is a daily discipline, a conscious choice to treat others not as categories, but as reflections of ourselves. Fairness is the quiet revolution that begins in the heart and ends in the rebuilding of nations. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that identity is both a blessing and a burden. A blessing because it gives you a sense of belonging, a thread that ties you to your roots, your story, your people. But a burden because the world often decides what that identity means before you even open your mouth. To live in fairness is to resist the idea that identity determines worth. It is to stand proudly in who you are while recognizing the humanity in everyone else. Fairness does not erase difference. It celebrates it without hierarchy. It allows diversity to exist without division. Each of us carries a story written by those who came before us. Stories of migration, struggle, hope, and resilience. These stories shape us, but they should never be used to separate us. The child of an immigrant, the descendant of a worker, the student from a small town, the parent working 2 shifts, all are part of one shared human experience, the desire to live with dignity. Fairness honors that desire. It does not ask where you were born. It asks what kind of world you want to build. There's a profound power in empathy, not as an emotion, but as an act of recognition. When you truly see another person's pain, not as a statistic, but as a mirror of your own vulnerability, something changes in the way you live. Fairness grows from that recognition. It reminds us that every human being wants the same things: security, opportunity, and respect. Fairness doesn't mean sameness. It means equity, the understanding that justice must adapt to people's realities, not force everyone to fit into one mold. But fairness also asks for courage. Courage to face our biases, to unlearn the lies that the world quietly teaches us, that one race is more deserving, one gender more capable, one background more legitimate. These lies are old, but they survive because they are convenient. They make inequality seem natural. Fairness challenges the comfort. It says, no, inequality is not natural. It is constructed, and anything built by human hands can be rebuilt. Fairness dismantles the myths that keep us apart and builds bridges that allow us to meet as equals. The challenge, however, is that fairness often feels invisible. It's not always rewarded. It doesn't trend, it doesn't go viral, and sometimes it doesn't even get noticed. Yet it's in the unnoticed moments that the moral arc of society begins to bend. The teacher who refuses to give up on a struggling student, the employer who hires based on potential rather than pedigree, the citizen who speaks up when they see injustice. These are the silent architects of fairness. They are the reason the world doesn't collapse under the weight of its own indifference. Fairness begins where fear ends. Fear tells us to protect only our own. Fairness invites us to expand that circle. Fear builds walls to feel safe. Fairness builds trust to make everyone safe. Fear asks, what if helping others costs me something? Fairness replies, what if it gives you everything: peace, strength, and meaning? We cannot build a just world with fear as our world foundation. Fairness asks us to have the courage to believe that justice for one group does not mean injustice for another, that equality is not a pie to divide, but a light to share. Look around any community that has found harmony, and you'll see fairness at work in quiet, steady ways. It's in how neighbors look out for one another, how institutions hold themselves accountable, how conversations happen across difference rather than despite it. Fairness is what turns coexistence into cooperation. It's the invisible thread that keeps society from unraveling, even when disagreements flare and ideologies clash. Fairness is not about uniformity. It's about balance, giving each person what they need to stand with dignity, not forcing everyone to stand in the same place. But for fairness to survive, it must live not just in systems, but in stories, in the way we talk to our children, the way we remember our history. Because if we teach a generation that fairness is weakness, they will inherit a world of division. But if we teach them that fairness is strength, that empathy and justice are not opposites but allies, then we build a generation capable of true leadership. Fairness is the language of the future, and if we fail to speak it, we'll repeat the mistakes of the past in louder tones. At its core, fairness is an act of imagination. It asks us to envision a world that doesn't yet exist, and then to live as if it already does. It asks a young student to believe their voice matters, even when the system ignores it. It asks the worker to stand tall, knowing that labor with integrity holds more value than status. It asks the bystander to act to refuse the luxury of neutrality when someone else is suffering. Fairness gives life to imagination by turning moral vision into social action. And maybe that's why fairness is so revolutionary, because it restores the simple truth that has been forgotten in a world obsessed with power. That our differences were never meant to be measured, only understood. It teaches us that fairness is not about erasing identity, but about elevating humanity. Every time we choose fairness in a conversation, in a policy, in a moment of conflict, we are quietly reshaping the world into something more livable, more compassionate, more human. Fairness is not a grand speech or a written law alone. It's a daily discipline of empathy and courage. It's a reflection of how much faith we still have in one another. And if we can hold on to that faith, that belief that everyone, regardless of where they come from or what they look like, deserves a fair chance, then fairness stops being an ideal and starts becoming a way of life. There comes a time when fairness stops being a dream we talk about and becomes a mirror we must face. Because fairness, in its truest form, demands honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable. It asks us to confront the privileges we carry, the biases we protect, the silences we justify. It's easy to talk about fairness when we feel wronged, but the real test comes when fairness requires us to share what we have, to listen when we'd rather speak, and to acknowledge truths that challenge our comfort. Fairness is not about feeling good, it's about doing good, especially when it costs something. The path to fairness is rarely smooth. It forces us to walk through the uncomfortable spaces of our society and our own hearts. It's standing in the middle of contradiction, knowing that you can love your country deeply while still demanding it do better, knowing that you can believe in equality while realizing you have unconsciously benefited from inequality. Fairness is not a destination, but a discipline, one that requires courage every single day. Because fairness is not passive, it's active. It requires participation, not permission. We live in a world where comfort often disguises itself as fairness, where people say, everyone has the same chance, without seeing the invisible walls that divide opportunity. Fairness challenges that illusion. It says that equality is not about everyone starting at the same line, but about recognizing that some people have been running uphill their entire lives, while others began with a head start. Fairness demands that we level the ground, not so some can lose, but so everyone can truly begin. There's a phrase often repeated, it's just the way things are. But fairness was never born from acceptance. It was born from resistance. Every social change that reshaped the world began with people who refused to accept the way things are. Fairness, by nature, is disruptive. It challenges the status quo that thrives on inequality. It refuses to allow power to remain comfortable while others remain voiceless. Fairness is a quiet rebellion, not one fought with weapons, but with conscience, empathy, and persistence. When you choose fairness, you are not just standing up for others, you are standing up for your own humanity. Because unfairness dehumanizes both the victim and the beneficiary. It robs one of dignity and the other of compassion. Fairness heals that divide. It restores balance. It reminds us that the purpose of privilege is not protection, but participation, to use what we have to lift those who've been left behind. And in doing so, we rediscover what community truly means. But fairness will always ask something of you. It will ask you to listen when your instinct is to defend. It will ask you to give space to voices long silenced. It will ask you to hold others accountable and yourself even more. Fairness doesn't need perfection. It needs humility. It doesn't ask you to have all the answers. It asks you to care enough to ask better questions. It's not about guilt. It's about growth. Fairness doesn't live in apologies. It lives in actions that change the way we treat people tomorrow. In truth, fairness is uncomfortable because it threatens the illusion of control. It reminds us that our achievements are not built in isolation, that every success stands on the invisible labor and sacrifices of others. Fairness is the willingness to recognize that connection and to turn gratitude into responsibility. Because fairness without accountability is empty, and equality without empathy is impossible. We must learn that fairness is not a favor we extend, but a framework we live by. It is not about choosing sides, but about choosing principles. It requires a new kind of strength. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to understand. Not the strength to silence, but the strength to listen. Not the strength to defend comfort, but the strength to challenge it. Real fairness doesn't come from those who have power, it comes from those willing to share it. Every generation faces this question. Will you defend the world as it is, or will you help build the world as it is? Should be. Fairness is how we answer that question. It's what separates complacency from courage. It's the invisible compass that guides moral progress. Fairness does not promise convenience. It promises meaning. And meaning is what sustains a person, long after applause fades or recognition disappears. When fairness enters a room, it changes the air. It makes people see each other different. It invites transparency where there was secrecy, compassion where there was cynicism, cooperation where there was competition. Fairness redefines strength not as the ability to win, but as the capacity to uplift. It reminds us that power is not about control, but about responsibility. The real mark of a civilized society is not how much wealth it accumulates, but how fairly that wealth is shared, how equally dignity is distributed, and how compassion governs power. To live fairly is to live awake, to refuse the easy comfort of ignorance. It is to see the systems that benefit you and still choose to challenge them. It is to understand that fairness is not about dividing what's yours, but multiplying what's possible for everyone. Fairness does not weaken a nation, it strengthens it. Because the greatest societies are not built on dominance, but on dignity. And the greatest leaders are not remembered for how high they climbed, but for how many they lifted on the way up. Fairness asks us to be brave enough to choose what is right over what is easy, to choose truth over tradition when tradition causes harm, and to choose unity over silence when division feels safer. It's not just a political stance, it's a human one, because fairness is not simply the absence of discrimination, it is the presence of justice. And justice, like any living thing, must be nurtured daily through our words, our choices, our empathy. That is how fairness turns from an idea into a force, one powerful enough to rewrite the future